Hello and welcome to Word from the Source with 4 Point Realtors. Today we're going to be discussing the hot topic of property tax in Trinidad and Tobago. And if you stay to the end, we'll have a bonus in store for you. Before we get into it, this episode is featuring and being recorded in one of our special listings. We are currently at Welcome Estate, which is off of Mariah Drive, off of Welcome Road in Cunupia. So without further ado, help me to welcome our special guest, Ms. Gillian Wolffe, attorney at law and tax specialist. So, Ms. Wolffe, thank you for coming and welcome.
Thank you very much, Michael, for having me here. It's my pleasure.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So first of all, let's start off. Can you tell us a bit about yourself, what you do, and what's your specialty?
Okay, well, I'm an attorney at law by profession with over 33 years practicing tax law. From the time I graduated, I've been doing tax law. I first worked at the Board of Inland Revenue for about 10 years, where I advised the Board of Inland Revenue on issues such as the interpretation of tax law. Thereafter, I joined a private practice, working with two of the big four firms in Trinidad and Tobago, advising multinational corporations who were willing to invest in Trinidad and Tobago, and they needed to know what's the impact of their investment in Trinidad and Tobago. So that's it in a nutshell. But I'm now retired and would like to give back some of my knowledge, to young people like yourself.
Yes, so we very much appreciate that. So you said you specialize in tax, so is it that you, in tax, so is it that you studied tax specifically?
No, well, when I was at university many moons ago, I did do revenue law. And when I came out, well, I have been doing tax all my life, over 33 years doing tax. So I don't know if that makes me a specialist, but that's the area that I focused most on. All different types of taxes. There's corporation tax, income tax, value-added tax, stamp duty, property taxes, you name it. All different types of taxes have been practiced over the years.
Okay, awesome. Well, I will be honest, this is the first time that I've ever met someone that studied revenue law specifically. You know, when you hear law, you're thinking criminal law, company law, those sort of different things. So to know revenue law, that's refreshing. So basically what I would have gathered from that is that when it comes to taxes, you're the person to talk to. You know what you're talking about.
Yes. Well, yeah, most of my colleagues, so it was a big class, over 100 of us, but most of them would have chosen topics like, contract law, criminal law, company law. Most people are intimidated by tax law, so very few of us would have done the revenue law at all.
So it might be like about 3 of you all doing revenue.
No, about 15. Whereas the other classes might have been 50 odd. There was just 15 of us, a very intimate class.
Okay, nice. So a lot of our followers have been asking me to speak on property tax because they are not 100% clear on what it is, what it entails, and so forth. So we're doing this interview to enlighten the public. So I'm going to start with a very basic question. What is property tax?
Okay, well, as it says, it's a tax on property. But let me go back a little. In 1920, we had the Land and Building Taxes Act, and that act was in effect until 2009. Under that act, we paid land and building taxes. You may be too young, you don't know, but your parents may have paid land and building taxes. In 2009, that act was repealed, and the Property Tax Act came into effect. Under the Property Tax Act, tax is imposed on property, and the crucial question is, what do you mean by property? And property is broadly defined in the legislation to include not only land, it also includes land covered by water. It includes land with a building thereon. Now, that might seem trivial to you, but land covered by water was a big issue under the Land and Building Taxes Act, the old act. I recall having to, resolve that issues for several clients when I worked at the Board of Inland Revenue. Because, there was always a challenge. The Inland Revenue would have taken the view that you should tax that land covered by water. And of course, the client would have said, no, we should not be paying tax on land covered by water. Well, that's resolved now by the Property Tax Act. Just to give you an example. So the Property Tax Act, when it came into effect in 2009, it addressed a number of issues that the Land and Building Taxes Act did not necessarily address. Okay, and I was telling you, it's a tax on property defined to include land and building. It doesn't really define building also. Building, we give it its natural meaning. 4 walls, a structure with 4 walls and a roof.
Oh, okay.
so
So,
that-
for clarity, when you say land covered by water, you refer to like people with beach houses and they have a portion of the
well,
sea. So, what's an example
it
of
would have been
land?
people who had ponds. So
Oh,
let's
okay.
or even remember the property tax covers not only residential. The government is starting to collect the tax from this year on residential property, but it also deals with the taxation of commercial property, industrial property, and agricultural property. So the legislation covers all different types of
Oh.
properties. If you think about it, agricultural land,
Yes.
you may have a pond
Pond,
on it
yeah.
or a river on it. Industrial land, you may have some water reserves on it.
Yes.
So, you're wondering, should that be excluded from the assessment of property tax? Well, under this new legislation, and I call it new, it's new to me, the Property Tax Act, all those types of lands are covered, and they should be factored in when the property is being valued.
Okay, awesome, awesome. So, what is the real importance of property tax?
Well, when you say the importance, I want you to really look at, well, the benefits of the property tax,
Okay.
All governments impose taxes, various types of taxes, as it needs revenue to provide goods and services to its citizens.
Right.
Without a stream of revenue, they will be unable to provide these goods and services. And we take it for granted. We take that the government provides streets and lights and education and health services, but it takes money. So property tax is a tax that the government imposes on property. And more importantly, what is the use of that tax, or what is the purported use? And I would like to rely on what the legislation says, and this is where we have to read it in the Property Tax Act in conjunction with the municipal corporation, well, the legislation that covers the municipal corporation. It has to do with the local reform legislation. It is not fully yet in effect, but I suppose gradually they'll bring it into effect. If you recall, we had local government elections last year,
Yes.
was to give effect to that piece of legislation and all that. So there's a whole lot of changes coming into being. So the intention is when this tax is collected under the legislation, the Board of Inland Revenue is empowered to assess the tax. But would you believe the Board of Inland Revenue has to forward the information to the municipal corporations so they will collect the tax. When they collect that tax, they will be in a position to provide goods and services to citizens living within their regions, the municipal corporation, the region. And when I say services, it has to do with things like preparing your roads, making sure your roads, garbage collection, cleaning up of markets or abattoirs. I was reading on the papers this morning while I was coming down. The one regional corporation was complaining that they have not received funds from central government.
Wow.
So they are unable to provide a number of services. This is taking care of roads, cemeteries, markets, and all that. I think the intention is, under this new regime, that the municipal corporation, since they are, they will be empowered to collect the taxes, they will have a ready source of funds to provide all the services that we would need, that we all need, that we take for granted, garbage collection and all that, a ready source of funds to provide those services. They no longer have to wait on central government.
Right.
And that's the big issue right now. I think from what they say, the corporations complain, there's always an issue of not enough funding. So I believe the intention of the government, as stated in the legislation also, is to use the property tax to provide those types of services that are close to all of us in our homes, in our communities. That's the importance of it, really.
Awesome, awesome. So basically, we're removing a bit of the red tape and getting directly closer to the source.
I don't know if you call it red tape or it's just a new procedure. It's a new procedure. Before, even under the land and building taxes, that went into the central government, and they always had the corporations and the boroughs. They had to wait now for central government to allocate funds to them. The intention is that they would not have this. Well, the wait was always long. This way now, it's hope that it expedites the process.
Okay, great.
Of funding for the corporation.
Well, I'm looking forward to that because there is the most bad mind pothole 2 streets away from by me. The locals have tried to repair it on numerous occasions, but it keeps coming back. So I'm very much looking forward to a speedy recovery of our streets where I live right now currently.
I am so glad you're saying that. It brings out the point of as to the importance of the property tax and what it will be used for. So what you have to do is develop a close relationship with your corporation. I don't know where you're from. With your corporation, find out who is your representative for your area and start to talk to them right away, bringing it to their attention. And hopefully they won't be like, well, we have no money for that. And they can say, well, yes. Or you can say, look, I have been paying my taxes, you and your neighbors, so yes, please, would you attend to our road, fix our roads? You know, that's it. That's the way it's meant to work. You're understanding?
Yes, yes, yes. So when is this property tax started to come into effect?
Okay, again, let me take you back. The Property Tax Act, well, before we get into the Property Tax Act, currently, the Commissioner of Valuations, he is tasked with valuing all properties. All right, and the Commissioner of Valuation is doing that under the Valuation of Land Act. The Valuation of Land Act and the Property Tax Act, they have to be read in conjunction. All right, so that's the first stage, Valuation of Land Act.
Right.
The Commissioner of Valuation is valuing properties all over. I understand that they have started off with residential properties. Under the law, once they value over 50% or more of all residential properties, they can start what they will say, put in place the valuation rules and all that. So the Commissioner of Valuation, you may have heard, they are valuing the properties right now. So he to value the property, you were required to, under the Property Tax Act, to file a return. As a property owner, you had to file your return. On that return, you had to give the dimensions of your house. You have to mention how many bedrooms and bathroom, and your location, of course. And based on all that, the Commissioner of Valuation may have visited the premises to confirm what was stated on the return and value the property. And when they value that property, that information will be fed to the Board of Inland Revenue. The Board of Inland Revenue will then assess you based on the valuations of the Commissioner of Valuations.
Okay.
I should tell you, because the valuations are still ongoing, and if you want to object to what the Commissioner of Valuation does, you have to object to the Commissioner of Valuation. You have 30 days after receipt of your notice of valuation. Right?
Okay.
So it's two pieces of legislation, two different agencies, two bodies. So you get your notice and you find the valuation is too high or something is wrong. You have 30 days to object, and you're dealing with the Commissioner of Valuation. Or you may get your notice and you have no problem with it as a property owner, right? You have nothing to do. You get your notice, you're done. You know how much they're going to value your property, whether it's $3,000 a month, which is $36,000 a year, or if it's $5,000 a month, which is $60,000 a year, because the tax is an annual tax, so that's why I'm extending it out an annual figure. So you get your notice of valuation, and barring you have no objections, you sit back and you wait. And in the due course, reading the both legislations together, the Commissioner of Valuation will send all the information to the Board of Inland Revenue, and the Board of Inland Revenue will prepare what we call an assessment rule. On the assessment rule, using the valuations from the Commissioner of Valuation, it will then determine what you call the annual taxable value of your property. What is that? It is the same valuation from the Commissioner of Valuations, less 10%. Okay, so if you use $5,000 a month as your property, $60,000 a year, you're less 10%. So that's $60,000. Take off 6. Everybody will get a deduction.
Okay.
That's $54,000, and then you apply a standard rate of property tax for all residents. Thank God, it's one rate, 3%.
Okay.
So 3% to 54,000, that takes you to just over 1,600. Dana, you advise me. Accountants, it's just over 1,600, about 1,625 per annum. They understand how it's done. But the Board of Inland Revenue will do that. Using the Commissioner of Valuations figures, the 60,000, take away 6,000, that's 54,000.
Right.
Multiply by 3%, which is the rate for residential property, and that's just over $1,600 per annum, and that is how it's done. And just to take it a little bit further, the Board of Inland Revenue will then feed all that information and authorize the municipal corporations to collect the tax.
Okay.
But you see who would have assessed the tax? The Board of Inland Revenue. You see who would have done the valuation? The Commissioner of Valuation. And you see who's collecting it now? The Municipal Corporation. So it's various agencies of the government that are coming together. And I suppose it will take some time. We have to see how this new regime work together. But let's be optimistic. Let's see. It's all meant to benefit us all in the long run. So I hope I haven't confused you, have I?
No. But just to clarify some stuff, because a lot of our clients would have called and said, oh my God, I got this letter and it's saying 54,000. Is this what I have to pay? So no, you have to deduct 10%. That's an allowance that we're all allowed to utilize. And thereafter, when you deduct that 10%, you take 3% of that figure, and that's the property tax value.
Yes, and it's an annual tax. It's the amount you have to pay
Annually. So let's say you would have used your same example of 60,000. It comes down to 1,600 at the end of it.
Roughly.
And then
Let's over 1,600, yeah?
And if you were to go further than that and divide that by 12, it's like a little over $100 a month.
Yeah, but
when you
people
look at
still
it that
angry with you. When I put it like that, people look at me and they were negative. But that's it.
But that's what it works out to.
That's what it works out to. Just to tell you a little more about the procedure, the Board of Inland Revenue, under the Property Tax Act, must issue a notice of assessment of the figures that we just discussed there. It must be done by March 31st of every year. So every year, you must be. I'm not too sure the valuation. No, the valuation will stay standard.
So the valuation stays standard?
Yes, but the notice of assessment, there's still an obligation on the Board of Inland Revenue by March 31st to issue that notice of assessment. And thankfully, just the Finance Act of 2023, it was made clear the tax must be paid by September 30th of the same year. Prior to that, there was some confusion that it would go over to the next year to pay it. I read it and it was very confusing to me. But I've read the most recent amendment in December 2023, the most recent Finance Act, and it brought a lot of clarity. The Board of Inland Revenue must issue the notice of assessment by March 31st, and payment must be made by September 30th of the same year.
Okay, so just to be clear again, the notice of assessment is that letter that you get in email with the annual figure, right?
You see a letter, but it must mark notice of assessment.
Okay, great.
In my understanding of doing tax, it's called a notice of assessment. If you don't get a notice of assessment and you just get a letter, you've got nothing. Don't pay.
Okay,
it must state notice of assessment.
Okay,
and you pay on that. That is what you'll be paying on. You have until September 30th.
September 30th. All right, so I get my notice of assessment. My notice of assessment, I have a 3-bedroom flat. My notice of assessment is 60,000. My neighbor has a 5-bedroom, 5-bathroom mini mansion. And they get their notice of assessment for 54,000. Now, don't ask how I know that. Just for argument's sake, I'm the village Mako and I see everything, right? I could raise my objection to the Commissioner of Valuation.
Okay, well, yes, let's go back. When you remember, I said earlier on that the Commissioner of Valuation is valuing all the properties. If when you got a notice from him, I don't know if you call that an assessment, I can't recall, but your notice of valuation from the Commissioner of Valuation, if you want to object, you're objecting to him way back then. You don't wait until the Board of Inland Revenue. It wouldn't work like that. So you object to him on the valuations. He will resolve it with you. He will say, well, what it is, your neighbor was much higher than yours or much lower than yours? What was the issue?
Yes, the mansion is much lower than my 3-bedroom, and I find that not fair.
Okay.
So I want to object.
Okay, so you object to him. You always have to provide reasons. You have 30 days within receipt of this notice of valuation. You have 30 days to object. You're picking up that with the notice of the Commissioner of Valuations. And he has 12 months to resolve that issue. Okay, 12 months. So you see, your property will be held back right away. But when I say, for good reasons, we are hoping in the end. If in the end you're wrong, you'll get plenty penalties and interest, but we'll deal with that later.
I was just about to ask, so that you could buy me 12 months if I were to do that.
So you think, but I don't think so. So the Commissioner of Valuation, and I think the government, remember, this is a new regime. The government anticipates that there will be some objections, right? And let's say the government, the Commissioner of Valuation, that department, he anticipates there will be someone. So I'm not into valuation, but I suppose both of you all will resolve that. Give him documentation to support it. You have 30 days within receiving your notice of valuation. It won't be called an assessment. I think it will be called a notice of valuation, right? Deal with him. After that is resolved, you may get a whole year, because he has a year, he may resolve it quicker than that too. Then he can feed your case to the Board of Inland Revenue. It's now resolved. You now agree his figure was too high, you give him your reason, or he decides, okay, we'll go along with you, drop it a little. But that figure now will then be fed to the Board of Inland Revenue, and the Board of Inland Revenue will assess you in the same manner, using that valuation, whatever you decide. If you want, you could take it further too, I could tell you. If you find the commissioner of valuation, you don't agree with what he says, after a year, you could go with, they are to establish a land tribunal.
Wow, okay.
Right? And the land tribunal, I think they have a time period too. But still, if there's some issue of law that it cannot be resolved there, you can take it to the Court of Appeal. So you can see your property could be tied up if you have an objection, and we're talking about valuation here. Right? So it has to be resolved with the Commissioner of Valuations Department. Well, let's hope it's all resolved, and you accept he knew what he was saying, he's right, or he lowers it a bit. He then gives it over to the Board of Inland Revenue, and then, because the Board of Inland Revenue is not getting involved in valuation. Under the land and building taxes, just to give you a little more history, they always had to refer issues as to valuations, because the Board of Inland Revenue is not into valuation.
Right.
That's a highly specialized skill. So they're not into valuation. They always had to discuss it with the Commissioner of Valuation. Yeah. It's now stated in the law more clearly that, you know, it doesn't even reach the Board of Inland Revenue until the Commissioner of Valuation gives the information over to the Board of Inland Revenue. So it's resolved, and then it will go through the same process. You'll get your 10% deduction, and the 3% rate will apply. But my understanding of the legislation, you will still be liable for the tax from when the assessment rule came into effect. And this takes me to another point which I want to bring to you. Let's say your neighbor didn't fill out the return that I told you. So he did not declare his property then. The Commissioner of Valuation is overwhelmed. They weren't aware. You think he gets away? What do you think? No, he doesn't get away. No, it's a house. You can't really hide it. It's not something you could.
Yeah.
So eventually, well, they have a lot going on, so he may get away for a year or two. But let's say they do find him, that person who didn't file a return, so they weren't even aware, or he was, you know, for whatever reason. When in fact he's found out, he will be liable for the tax for when the assessment rules first came into place. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So you could wait 5 years. When they find you, you will have to pay the taxes for all the 5 years. I'm thinking, you know, about prospectively.
Will there be any penalties attached to that?
Yes, that is it, yes. The penalties for late payment. So that first year, all of us, let's say everything goes as planned, is due September 30th, as I say. From October 1st, there's a penalty which is called an increased tax of 10% and interest on the tax and the increased tax of 15%.
That's per month, per day, how does it? Per annum, okay.
But with the penalty is 10%, so you're just late by a day.
Right.
There's a penalty of 10% and interest of 15% per annum on the penalty and the tax combined.
Wow.
Now, they normally prorate it. As I said, this is a new piece of legislation. So if it's 15% you're a day late, it will just be interest of 1 over 365 days multiplied by 15%.
Okay.
If you're 10 days late, it will be 10 over 365
So basically you pay by the amount of days that you're late.
You're late.
It's not a general thing, okay.
So as we were discussing, this person who is 4 years late, he'll be paying for 4 years of penalties and interest.
Wow.
Because, you know, the understanding is the property was there all the time. You were supposed to have filed a return and ensure that your property is on the valuation rules that the Commissioner of Valuation is working on now. And from there, you can feed it to the Board of Inland Revenue and get onto the assessment rule. So I don't think you can be happy if you figure you know you have a property, you didn't file the return, and you're glad you really get away. As if you could hide a property. You can't hide a property in your pocket.
Yeah.
At some point, it could be 10 years later, they will find you, but you will still be held liable from when it first took effect. You follow what I'm saying?
And I'm assuming if you decide to sell the property before you get caught, that will come up in the title search.
Oh, yes, precisely.
Okay.
Right, precisely, right. Well, before we had the Property Tax Act, anytime you purchase a property, you had to attach the latest land and building
Correct.
taxes receipt.
Correct, yeah.
Up to now,
Up
if you're
to now,
buying
yeah,
a
it still
property, they
happens,
want
yeah.
one for 2009.
2009, correct. Yeah.
They still
Yeah.
want that. Well, when this comes into effect, if you're buying a property, they'll ask you for your property
Yeah.
tax receipt, you know. So there will be various checks from the government to, you know, find out if there's a loophole, if someone got away, because the commissioner of valuation could miss a property.
So in a sense, your time is limited if you're trying a thing. You'll get caught.
Well, not only that, it will cost you.
And it will cost you.
Yeah, now, what also, I don't know if it will apply in this situation, but after 3 months, the taxes, remember I told you the due date is September 30th. After 3 months, if you don't pay, the board, there's power for the board to exercise distress, to come and seize your chattel item, to sell to cover the taxes.
Wow.
Right? I'm not too sure, working at the Board of Inland Revenue then, they never used those provisions. There were sort of provisions like that, they never did. But remember, I know the TTRA, the Trinidad and Tobago Revenue Authority, should be coming on stream, and I think they would want to be more compliant. So those, but there are all those powers for the Board of Inland Revenue. And after 5 years, if you don't pay the taxes, the law provides, the Property Tax Act, they could sell your property
Wow.
to cover the taxes. That's how serious it is.
That's how serious it is if you
Yes,
decide not to pay your property tax.
Yes, but I don't think they, you know, they will, you know, they will prefer to work with you. You know,
So
right?
the initial stage will be to sell the chattels. Now, I would like you to define what chattels are.
Well, it's not. Well, it's anything that's not attached to the property. So, I suppose a home like a TV, a
Refrigerator.
fridge, so all those sorts of things, right? They can take, but wouldn't be things that are attached. So
Okay.
it's loose. Normally, I'm giving it is my natural understanding of it. Something that can easily be moved.
Okay. And then
Whereas-
at the 5-year mark, you could possibly
Well, that's what
lose
the
your
law
home.
provides. I'm
That's
only
what the law
quoting-
provides.
Yeah, it's not me saying this. I try to read the law, interpret it, and apply it, and you know,
Yes.
give it that understanding. And that's when I saw it. I said, "Wow, this is serious." After 5 years, yes, you know, you can. They
According to the law,
According-
it could be
can
exercised.
yes, under the Property Tax Act is stated there.
Okay, I got you. Well, at this point, we will take a break. Let's take a look at one of the features of this property. We'll be right back.
Okay. Yes, you know, Michael, I told you a lot about how you can object to the commissioner of valuation if you don't agree with the valuation of your property. But I should also mention, when you get a notice of assessment from the Board of Inland Revenue, you also have the right to object. You know, but on this basis, it cannot be on valuation whatsoever. All valuations, any objections thereto, you must go to the commissioner of valuation.
Right.
But if you get your notice of assessment and you find, for example, the name on it is incorrect, they spelled your
Right.
name incorrectly, or it was your father has passed and you want his name removed now, you know, it's now
Yes, yes.
yours, or something like that, or they refer to the incorrect lot number, or, you know, whatever, other issues like that. I would call them mostly procedural issues. You can object to the Board of Inland Revenue, and you have 21 days to do so within receipt of your notice of assessment. You must provide documentation to support it and all that.
Right.
And, you know, the Board of Inland Revenue will review whatever it is that has to be reviewed. If you still disagree with them, you have a right to take it to the Tax Appeal Board, just to close that loop. So
Okay.
there are those, you know, so you have those opportunities to clarify all those little issues that may arise.
Okay. Well, I mean, I guess at that point, they can't really argue with me as to how to spell my name, right?
Or something like that. I'm just giving you a rough example.
Right,
yeah,
right,
so
right.
they will readily change it. Now, as we mentioned that, I should tell you though, you cannot take the position, I'm not paying the tax because they spelled Michael wrong. Because the law provides for
That's a
that.
good point, yeah.
Little errors like that doesn't vitiate the tax. But you know human nature, we'll say
Yes,
that.
that's negligence.
They spell the Michael,
That's
they
not
leave out
my
the A.
name, that's
So
not
that's
me.
not my name, so I'm not paying the tax. Those little errors like that will not vitiate the tax. You're still obligated to the tax, to paying the taxes, okay?
Rats.
All right.
All right, well, this might seem like a dumb question, but who is liable for paying property tax?
Oh, that's not a dumb question at all. That's very, very important. The legislation speaks to that, and it says the owner. And who's the owner?
Mm-hmm.
It's very broad. There are a number of different descriptions. So it may be the legal owner,
Right.
or it could just be an occupier, someone who is an agent of the property or manager, someone who has control over the property. All right? So it's very broad.
So just to be clear, if I'm renting a property,
Mm-hmm.
I'm occupying the property, I'm managing the property, all of these different things. Is it that as a renter, I'm liable to pay the property tax?
I don't believe so. I don't believe that was the intention. I think my understanding is the owner still,
Right.
the landlord, should pay the taxes.
Right.
But let's say the owner is abroad or anything. My understanding is they can call upon the tenant to pay the taxes, but the tenant can deduct it from the rent to the landlord.
Oh, so essentially the landlord is still paying you.
That's what my understanding is. The way the legislation is worded, the onus is not on the tenant, because who has to file this return? Remember I told
Correct.
you, first of
Yes.
all, the owner has to file a return with the commissioner of valuation stating the dimensions and all that.
Yes.
It's not on the tenant.
Correct.
It's on the owner. But let's say this owner is abroad and is not doing anything. I suppose the tenant can do it. But ultimately, it's still not the liability of the tenant.
Yes.
The tenant is entitled to deduct it from the rent that it normally pays to the landlord.
Yes,
Follow?
yes, yes. Because after the 5-year period, when they take the house, the tenant will get another spot to rent.
But you know, I really don't think I don't think our Board of Inland Revenue
Will
are that
take it that far.
draconian.
Yes,
as they-
yes,
but I'm
yes,
just
yes.
telling you, is there any law? And I could be saying so based on my old or my past experience. We never could tell if going forward they will adopt a draconian approach and after 5 years sell your property. All right? The point is, you don't want to reach it
But
at any
it's in the law and it can
Yes.
be exercised if
Yes.
they feel to.
So I know the next question you're going to ask me, because every time I do any discussion on this, everybody asks me, what about a squatter?
Right, yes.
So you tell me, what is a squatter? It's somebody who may, you know, start occupying a place and they would like to own it eventually. Sometimes they may get a deed of comfort or they may not. But do you think they are in control of that place? Do you think they're managing it? I think they are.
Yeah.
And to me, they would be called upon to pay the tax, right? As I said, the legislation doesn't mention the word squatter anywhere, but it just use the words an occupier.
Right.
But aren't they occupying it? And as I told you, what's the use of this tax? Is to provide goods and services into our community. Wouldn't they need services of garbage collection or cleaning of drains or, you know, of market services, you know, whatever it is. They're all in a community, so I don't see why they will be exempted from the property tax. Okay?
Also, squatters will be liable for paying the property tax as well.
Well, why not? Are they in control of the piece of land that they may be
Yeah,
occupying?
they are. They are.
may have a nice little home on it. I've seen some squatters living in fancy homes, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
And they may have just a deed of comfort, or they may not have a deed of comfort. So because you don't, so it's broadly worded in the legislation. As I say, it has not been tested.
Right.
But it's tested in the court of law, but I don't see why they will be exempt. That's just my view of it, though.
Oh,
But
okay,
if you think
okay.
about it, people want it both ways. They want to occupy the property, they want to get all the benefits, but when it comes to the taxes,
It's
they
not
don't
mine.
want to pay. You know, it's not mine, it's the
not mine.
government. It doesn't work like that.
I got you.
Yeah.
All right. All right, at this point, we'll take another break, have another look at a feature of this property, and when we come back, we'll be discussing stamp duties. Stay tuned. Welcome back, guys. So let's get into stamp duty. So, Ms. Wolffe, Explain to us, what exactly is stamp duty?
Okay. Well, unlike property tax, stamp duty is another tax really imposed by the government on documents.
Okay.
Let us sink in for a minute. It's on paper. Documents as defined in the Stamp Duty Act. Now, the legislation speaks about an instrument, but it's really documents. So, you're into real estate. So tell me, what sort of document is evidence of someone owning a property?
Deed,
Precisely.
certificate of title, yeah.
The deed and certificate of title in respect to RPOs, right? That deed, when a purchaser acquires a property, they're required to pay stamp duty on that document.
Okay.
And when you pay that stamp duty, it's a whole long process. The property will be filed with the land registry. And what does that do? It gives notice to the world. So when you bought a property, it gives notice to the world that you own this property.
Yes.
You wouldn't get it stamped unless you pay the stamp duty. All right?
Oh.
So it's unlike, I get a lot of questions and people tend to mix it up. We discuss the property tax. The property tax has to do with the use of your property, residential property, and what value you think you can rent it for, and also if it's commercial property. The stamp duty has to do with a document. Do you know of anybody who owns property and don't have a document? If they do, they put themselves at risk.
Correct.
Can you say, I own that piece of land there, but you have no documents to prove it?
Never.
If not, you own nothing.
If not, just squatting.
If that is squatting, right? And ultimately, you have nothing. So stamp duty is on the actual legal document that conveys title to you. Okay? It's defined clearly in the legislation prescribes the specific documents. It also applies to certain types of contractual arrangement. And having said so, it also applies to mortgage arrangements. As you know, most purchasers, they're not fortunate enough, not even myself, to have the entire purchase price of the property, whether it's $1 million or $2 million. Most of us have to go to a bank to get a mortgage from the bank. So any property transaction, normally there are two main documents. The transfer of the legal title, that document is stamp duty, as well as a mortgage agreement you have with the bank. That also is subject to stamp duty. And a number of other types of documents are subject to stamp duty. A share transfer, bond, a lot of financial instruments, sophisticated instruments, leases, some of them are subject to stamp duty, that document. Without stamp duty being paid on a document when it should be, the document itself is of no use. It cannot be enforced in a court of law.
Okay.
So if in fact you buy a piece of property, but you never took time, or you prepared a deed, but you didn't get it stamped, later on you cannot enforce that against anyone. The land registry will have no record of you purchasing the property. So you could go with a piece of paper, it has no value really.
Wow.
You understand the importance of it?
So can it be seen that the stamp duty is the cost of registering your documents with the registrar?
Well, in effect, it's not, no, not really. It's just a cost, it's a tax the government impose on on certain documents, okay? But I wouldn't say for registering, because there are other little fees for registering, maybe $50 or so. But for you to get it in the land registry and to give notice to the world, because when you're buying a property, you have to do a search.
Yes.
You do a search, so you're going to buy a property and someone say, yeah, this is my deed. You can't just accept that. Right? They can make up a deed and do any fancy thing.
Correct.
You go to the land registry and they'll say, yes, we saw 4 years ago that person had bought it. And prior to that person, it was owned by John Brown, and you go back 20 years. And prior to that person, you can go, you go back to a clear route of title. You make sure that you can trace right back so that the person you're dealing with, you see, yes, they have a clear title. If you know, I don't know if you ever noticed it, it will also tell you if there are any encumbrances here. And I'm looking at mortgages. They'll tell you, no. 15 years ago, there was a mortgage, and I'm not seeing that mortgage was released.
Or they might tell you, we have some property tax due.
Oh, if they tell you that. So this is what the land registry has. It's a registry of all the transactions on the land that you're purchasing, and other encumbrances that you may have on the land. It will be in the land registry. Stamp duty, when you pay the stamp duty, it will be entered into the land registry. Without the stamp duty, to me, you only have a piece of paper there. You have nothing. without that being stamped. Because how it's done, your attorney who's dealing with the transaction will send the documents down to the Board of Inland Revenue. They will send draft documents really. That's what is done. They send the draft documents and let the board adjudicate. It's based on the cost that you're paying for this property, so 1.5 million, let's say. The board will adjudicate and say, well, how much stamp duty you have to pay. Then you get it finalized, pay the stamp duty, and then it will be filed in the land registry. That's the importance of stamp duty. Mortgage documents is the same thing. You send it to the board, they determine this document based on the value is whatever figure, and then you finalize it, you pay it, and it will be filed also in the registry, a documentation of this mortgage on the property.
Right, right. Okay, so what are the different rates that the stamp duties go on?
Yes. There's several rates of stamp duty, and from 2021, fortunately, the government waived, or I should say they made properties to the residential property for first-time homeowners up to a maximum of $2 million are exempt from property tax. Stamp duty.
From stamp duty.
Stamp duty. So if it is a first-time homeowner, a young person like you and Dana, a young person now buying your first home, you're exempt from stamp duty on the first $2 million in value.
Wow, that's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah? And also you're exempt from the stamp duty on the mortgage document also on the first $2 million. After that, well, let me tell you, I have to refer to the rates. There are various rates. The stamp duty rates, when we're dealing with a first-time homeowner, if you're buying property to the value of $2 million, there's an exemption from stamp duty.
Right.
1 cent above that $2 million, up to $2.25 million, the rate is 5% on that additional amount.
Right, the excess over the $2 million.
And any amount in excess of that $2.25 million, it's 7.5% in excess. You know, any amount above that. Now you have plenty of money. If as a young person, first-time owner, you could buy a property
for $2 million,
for over $2 million. But that's it, right? Yeah. So that's the first-time homeowner. If in fact you already own a home and you're buying another home, a second home, the first $850,000, the rate is 0%, no stamp duty. Any amount in excess of the $850,000 up to $1.25 million is 3% on that excess amount.
Yes.
And over that $1.25 million and 1 cent up to $1.75 million, the rate is 5%. And any amounts over $1.75 million and a cent, the rate is 7.5%. 7.5%. But this is for land and building. So you're buying a land and building. Now, if it is you're buying only land, because some people are more enterprising, they buy only the land.
Yeah.
They don't buy a house. There are different rates. Okay. So if you're buying only land, residential land, the first $450,000, no stamp duty.
Okay.
This is land alone.
Land only.
$450,000. Between $450,000 and $650,000, the rate is 2%.
Okay.
And over $650,000 and 1 cent, up to $850,000, the rate is 5%. Over $850,000, the rate is 7%. Now, fortunately, if you're purchasing it, your lawyers and they will know all these rates.
Yeah,
okay?
yeah, for
they
sure.
will know all these rates. But it is a bit confusing because a 2%, a 5%, a 7%, a 3%, but the lawyers, they will know. Not to mention also, as I said before, the documents will be sent to the Board of Inland Revenue for the Board of Inland Revenue to adjudicate and say, well, yes, based on the selling price that we're seeing in this deed, they'll let you know how much is the stamp duty. When you're exempt, you still have to submit it to the Board of Inland Revenue. Your lawyers will do that for you. Yeah. They will stamp on it exempt. And then, well, you know, the first $2 million, if you're a first-time homeowner, you know you're exempt on that amount, and they will tell you, well, based on the excess amount, you know, this is what you have to pay. Okay, so that's it basically. There are different rates of stamp duty also for commercial property, but I'm not going to address that because we are more concerned about residential.
About residential, yeah. For now, we'll just deal with the residential. Yeah? Okay.
There's one other point I wanted to raise because I know someone will ask me this. So we have discussed in relation to your property, the property tax.
Right.
We have discussed the stamp duty.
Right.
There's one other financial cost because most people are excited about owning property that you should factor in, and those are legal costs.
Yes.
That is also determined by the Legal Professions Act because they're non-contentious. It's a standard rate. I have it also here, just letting you know. This is not a tax, though. A tax is imposed by the government.
Right.
It's compulsory and it's for public purposes. Remember, the property tax is to see about your drains
Yeah.
and all that. The legal fees that your lawyers may charge, that's not tax. That is for their services.
Right.
But you as a purchaser, you may need to have an idea. So basically, attorney's fees. If it is the property is valued up to $100,000, the fee is 1.5%. So that's $1,500.
Right.
So that's the first 100,000. It's a scale rate, huh? And then after that, the next $400,000, the fee is 0.75%.
Okay.
So if you're buying a property of $500,000, whether it's land or land and a house, the first you would pay $3,000 and $1,500, $4,500 in legal fees. Let me explain to you how I get that. On the first 100,000, it's 1.5% of 100,000, and then on 400,000, it's 0.75%, which I told you is about 3,000. So you should pay no more than $3,000 and $4,500 in legal fees. Now your lawyer may give you a discount. Now any amount in excess of the 500,000 is 0.5%. If you're buying $1 million property, from 500,000 to $1 million at 0.5%, that's an additional 2,500. So the total attorney's fee on $1 million property is roughly $7,000.
Right. So that's on $1 million property.
On
So
$1 million.
anything beyond that, needless to say,
it's 0.5% on
0.5%.
0.5 and the excess amount over $1 million.
On the excess amount.
0.5% is the highest, you know, is the lowest amount on the excess value over $1 million.
Well, that's very interesting because I was not aware that it was a standard rate used for legal fees. I thought it depended on the attorney office that you would have used and their rates.
Well, we all as attorneys, you know, we are a member of the Law Association and we are bound by the rules that are mentioned in the Legal Profession Act. And, you know, these are standard rates. Now, the attorneys will also charge you fees for the mortgage documents because most of us will need to. It's normally the same rate, but they may give you a 50% discount for preparing, as I said, the deed itself, the deed of transfer, as well as the mortgage deed. The same rates here, but they will give you a discount if they're doing the 2 sets of deeds.
Okay, okay.
All right?
So basically, with all of these different rates, we can more or less calculate a rough idea of what the closing cost will be.
That's why I mentioned it here. That's why I mentioned it here. So you know you're sitting happy. Up to $2 million you're exempt from stamp duty, and I'm going on the basis that most first-time homeowners would not go
up to $2 million.
Right. So you get away from all stamp duty. Just bear in mind your legal fees. You may have, let's say, a little $10,000 in legal fees.
Right.
Because the government, it's in their power to waive stamp duty, but you really can't waive legal fees. The attorneys, they do their work.
That's their livelihood.
Precisely, to draft your deed, to make sure it's correct, you know, and everything. And that's just to give you a ballpark figure. It could be a little less, a little more, depending on the amount of work, because you know it doesn't factor in searches. If you're searching a property, there may be a little cost you have to factor in for doing the searches also. Okay,
awesome. Well, I want to thank you so much for this information. Can you tell us what you do, like what services you provide, and if so, how we could get in contact with you if anyone is interested in your services?
Okay, as I told you, I retired, and you know I would like to share the knowledge that I have. So I will be running some tax courses for the public at large. They can all visit my Facebook page. It's Gillian Wolffe Tax. I'll be offering courses in property tax, of course, as well as corporation tax, income tax act, VAT, and withholding taxes. You know, so I'm looking forward to those sessions so that I can share with young people like yourselves, you know, the knowledge that I've gained over the years. I have this fear that as I get older, now that I'm retired, I will start.
The knowledge will be lost.
Yes, I feel so. I'm hoping I'm making it as simple as possible and pass it on to if people are willing, you know, and they're quite affordable, I think. And if you have an interest in tax, you can check out my Facebook page, or you may call me on 376-1763.
Okay.
or WhatsApp me, and we can discuss further how I can assist you with respect to your tax obligations.
Okay, awesome. So we take this course and now we are able to file our own taxes, etc. in the future going on.
I'm not too sure if you will be able to. At least you should be able to, as I said.
Okay.
But for companies, taxes could be very complex. It's a lot of issues. You still may not be that confident, or it may give you the confidence. You may have a lot of persons, a finance director in a company, he's doing taxes, but he's not so confident. He's not sure if he has it up to date. Well, I'll be telling you all the allowances and deductions that you're entitled to up to 2024. In my experience, because I've been doing taxes, as I said, for many years, sometimes a client come to me and they're referring to deductions that are 10 years old. They're not aware that the law has changed since then. Some people aren't aware, for example, individuals like you and I, if we're an employee, you're entitled to a $90,000 deduction. They don't know simple things like that.
Yeah.
They knew when it was 84. Some of them knew when it was 72.
Yes, correct.
So I'll be doing it up to date, 2024. And you may find it informative to help you, to give you the confidence to deal with your taxes, and it may save you some cash also. If you do it the right way, you may save and avoid penalties and interest.
Ms. Wolffe, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it, and this information was very, very educational. And I hope that it would have shed light to the public as per property tax, and maybe bring it down from this huge mountain to the molehill that it really is when you break it down. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, it was my pleasure being here. It was really nice talking to you, and I hope you found it informative. It may be a lot of information, but, I really think people should make the effort to try and understand it.
Of course, of course. Well, it's recorded, so you could press pause and, soak it in, press play, so that's good. All right, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. You're most welcome.
Okay, guys, so I want to say thank you for joining us, and I hope this was educational to you, and now you'll have a better understanding of property tax. I want to put out a disclaimer that we are not politically affiliated in any way. In fact, I can't even get a HTC house. The purpose of this video is simply to shed light on what property tax is, the purposes that it's intended for it, and to make it less scary than it seems to be right now. So thanks for joining us. I want to say a special shout out to our sponsors today, Temp Exchange AC Services. You can look them up for your air conditioning needs at any point in time. It's always a cool scene with them. Take care, guys. Cheers.